If I ask you, what's the most brutal war that happened in Teyvat? Some of you might say it's the Cataclysm, and some others would say it's the Archon War. But in my opinion, I think it's the Great Calamity. The Great Calamity refers to the war between the Primordial One and the Second Who Came. The war that collapsed the heavens and the earth was rent asunder. Rivers were overturned, plagues were spread, illusions were brought and broke through the land. Destruction was everywhere. And now that we finally know what's the Great Calamity, let's find out about the outcome of this war. The true winner of this war is the most confusing part. The lore hints that the Primordial One is the winner. But there's also theories that the Second Who Came is the actual winner and is impersonating the identity of the Primordial One. I already explained this theory. Check it out if you're interested. After the war, the Seelies were exiled from the heavens, and they were stripped out of their minds. But the only Seelie that survived was Nabu Malakata, the flower goddess. And now the Seelies are just empty husks that guide adventurers to treasure. But back then they used to have beautiful forms. According to the book, Records of Jiyun, Volume 4, we learn that the Moon Sisters were present when a sudden disaster and terrible calamity happened. And the Seelies got exiled and stripped out of their voices and wisdom and lost their wondrous forms. Does this sound familiar? This is literally what happened to the Seelies when the Primordial One and the Second Who Came fought. It appears that disaster and calamity are terms that refer to this war, because even in Nabu Malakata's story, she referred to that war as disaster. And now, according to the book, Moonlit Bamboo Forest, Volume 3, we learn that the Moon Sisters turned against each other and died when the world was smashed against the tides of a great calamity and disasters. Once again, we see the terms calamity and disaster, and it's obviously referring to the war between the two thrones of heavens. Now I would like to talk about the ancient civilizations that worshipped the Primordial One, such as Khaenri'ah, which was called Vyakuyakoku back then. During the Great Calamity, Khaenri'ah was separated from Teyvat and fell in the ocean. There, they met the bishops who ruled that place, which led to a war between the two. The Khaenri'ahs found out that the bishops hate the light, and so they used light to chase them. The Khaenri'ahs hated living in such place, and they kept praying and praying, but the Primordial One could not hear.
Life is a boundless ocean of suffering. We are only searching for the way home.
Meanwhile, in Salvandagnar, a celestial nail fell on the Green Mountain, which created the never-ending snow, and created the snowstorms, as well as causing the extremely cold climate. This made living very difficult for the inhabitants of Salvandagnar, and the cold was killing them. And one of those people was a scribe named Yuko. In his last words, he wished for the downfall of the heavens and the world. And coincidentally, in Dragonspine, we find a hilly churl with the name Yuko. Now we must remember that the celestial nails were dropped by the Primordial One after his war with the Second Who Came, except for the nail in the desert, because it was dropped either during or after the Archon War. Moving on to another ancient civilization that worshipped the Primordial One, that existed on Surumi Island. Its true name is unknown, but we do know it's a civilization way older than Ru's tribe. This civilization was also hit by a nail, which caused the fog. The nail is nowhere to be seen for now, so it's probably hidden underground. Next we have the Upside Down City. It's a civilization way older than Khaenri'ah, and its architecture is similar to Khaenri'ah, which tells us that it's also a civilization that worshipped the Primordial One. As for the reason it's upside down, we have no information on that, but we can find a celestial nail nearby, and we've seen the celestial nails do some crazy shit, like creating never-ending snow and causing sub-zero climate. creating fog that covers an entire island for thousands of years, and creating a desert bigger than both Mondstadt and Liu combined. I wouldn't be surprised if it turns out that the celestial nail in the chasm caused the city to turn upside down. As I said before, the nails started dropping after the Great Calamity, and one of them fell on Salvindagnar. And that's how the snow was created. During that time, 3 boxes were made by 3 people with writings inside of them. Those people are the priest, the princess, and the scribe. And we're gonna take a look at the scribe's box. In the very end, he said,
I've heard of people who are building a new nation without gods. Perhaps they'll have the power to stand against the world.
The scribe is obviously talking about Khaenri'ah. So this means, when Salvindagnar was falling apart, Khaenri'ah was being built. This would also mean that the group of people that we now call the Khaenri'ahs were present during the Great Calamity, before they started building Khaenri'ah. Now let's go around everything I've said so far. The Great Calamity happened, which is the brutal war between the primordial one and the second who came. The Seelies were exiled from the heavens and cursed. The Moon Sisters died, and Khaenri'ah was separated from Teyvat and sinked underwater. Celestial nails were thrown and fell on some civilizations like Salvindagnar, which caused destruction. And coincidentally, Khaenri'ah was being built after the Great Calamity ended. And now we really need a date for these events. But I think I figured it out. In the book Records of Jiyun, Volume 6, we learned that a nameless star fell when Morax would still have been young, which created the chasm. And this star left behind a fragment somewhere in Liu. And now in the solar relic artifact, it also tells the story of a star falling from the sky and creating a gorge, and a piece of it remaining in Liu. And this event happened when Morax was still young. But this time, we finally know the name of that nameless star. It's called the Solar Chariot. We also find out that this solar chariot fell when the Moon Sisters died in a calamity. And there's a theory with tons of evidence that Morax came from the Solar Chariot. It's on my page if you're interested. And now we can assume that the Great Calamity and everything related to it happened over 6,000 years ago.